Hello there. Before we get started on today's episode, I'd like to ask a short favor. If you're interested in either of the two books that I have written and am about to release, head on over to my website at theanxioustruth.com/books. There you can learn about both books, one of which is free, and you can get on my mailing list to be notified when each book is released and how you can get it. I would really appreciate that. Okay, let's get rolling.
Hi, Drew.
Hey, Monique, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. I'm glad you made it.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
So, for everybody listening, I'm here with my friend Monique Coven once again, joined again by Monique. And Monique is a trauma recovery coach that you can find at cpdsdcoach.com. And Monique and I get together once in a while to talk about some interesting topics that are sort of related to what we got going on in the podcast. And what are we going to talk about today?
Well, I was telling you about, and I actually made a podcast on this. I discovered, which I kind of already knew, but I myself was listening to a training on trauma, and it was talking about one of the biggest shocking experiences when we have trauma is that we go through this experience of, fight and flight, getting ready to, our bodies is getting mobilized, ready to do something. And then we have this realization that there's nothing we can do. And in this training, Dr. Bessel van der Kolk said, it's this realization that we cannot escape. It's the inescapability piece. And when I heard that, I said, yes, that's exactly it. It's that experience that we have been trauma survivors, especially with early developmental trauma, where abuse was repeated over and over and over again. We went through that experience repeatedly where we desperately needed help and wanted to escape, but we couldn't. And that experience was completely overwhelming on our physiology and our psychology. And this plays out when we are faced with new situations in our present that we think, whether it's conscious or not, that we might be in that same experience where there's no escape.
That's so interesting.
Yeah.
Because so much of the stuff that my listeners hear me talk about all the time is all about teaching your brain the fact that there is a natural escapability. Like, if we become non-reactive to our anxiety and panic, we will naturally escape it because it will end. But if there's a traumatic event in the past, you may be conditioned to say, no, there's nothing I can do. Like, this is just going to continue. Is that,
yeah.
Do I have that kind of nailed properly?
Well, the experience of the trauma, and this again, I'll repeat it, it happens at the autonomic level. So it's not in the conscious thinking. It kind of happens, underneath, and we go into this immobilization. And that experience is so frightening for us. It's completely overwhelming, that helpless, frightening space. And it was conditioned in, as you were saying, over and over and over again, that yes, we have this deep memory that, this could happen again, and I'm not going to do it. And I don't even want to go there. So we don't even try. And and for me, I get that because I used to have, you've heard me talk about this before, for years and years, I had a fear of driving far. And I was afraid that I would get lost. And so just the idea of what my mind would anticipate would really be that feeling that I had, which was I'd get lost and then I'd freeze and then I couldn't speak. And then so I was like imagining that same experience that happened to me a million times in my past. I thought that would happen if I got lost when I drove. And I saw things through that lens. I didn't see it through the through the reality, which was that I have a mouth, I can ask for directions, I have a phone that has a GPS, I have a credit card, I have these kind of tools. I couldn't even think of those things because all I remembered was helpless. powerless,
Yeah.
stuck, and all of that.
That's so interesting. I think it relates to a topic you and I discussed in one of our earlier episodes together. And, I know we talked about this privately too, where I run into people on a regular basis that have had those bad experiences that you're talking about in their past, whatever they may be. And some people, when they're in this situation where now they're dealing with an anxiety disorder, they almost feel that, what's the point? Why should I even bother to do this thing that, Drew, you keep talking about? And I've often had a hard time putting my brain around, like, I've always attributed to, is it a confidence and a self-esteem thing? But maybe it's more so what you're talking about here, where what's the point of, why should I even try that? That's inescapable. That inescapability has been conditioned in. Like, why would I go into this fearful, difficult, scary situation when I know that it's just going to continue?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. So that inability or a blockage or something that says, I shouldn't even try this. There's no way this is going to happen for me. Yeah. Maybe this is what we're seeing.
Yeah. And again, because we've had that experience of that immobilization and the fear that goes with that, we will do anything not to feel that again. But what I realized was that, I mean, you really have to get kind of insight into that you are, what's going on, first of all, and that was your experience in the past so many times, but that actually you do have what it takes. Many, even people that I work with now who have that same fear, they can drive. They know how to drive. They've got the skills. They've done it before. It's just still this fear that, but what if, I don't know, I start to panic and then I go into that place where I suddenly can't speak. My language is gone and I'm, and it's kind of understanding that, yeah, that makes sense. And you have compassion for that because, my goodness, you've been through that so many times. And so instead of getting angry at yourself and not having compassion, you look at this with a place of compassion. And that really you're just trying to protect yourself in a way because you're afraid it might happen again. But knowing that you actually, in reality, have everything you need to be able to drive, to be able to manage, you have it. And so, yeah, that's kind of the change that can happen.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. It just, I find it so fascinating. I mean, not fascinating. It's almost tragic and heartbreaking sometimes when you see somebody, and I'm always kind of, we have that different approach, you and I. You're looking at the underneath sometimes, and for me, I'm usually just trying to solve the problem of the disorder itself, which could be piled on top of that trauma in the past, which is no good. But
like you can imagine for someone who, let's say, has had a really traumatic history, and they've gone into that fight and flight a zillion times because of that fear of the fear of inescapability came up. And then you say, now just go drive, push yourself, just do it.
Right.
It's, if you haven't really had a wider understanding of what's going on, sometimes it can be, you can experience what you were telling me. Some of your clients are like, no, why should I even bother? Because they think that's going to happen. Yeah.
Yes. It's almost that they're defeated before they even try. I think, and everybody wants to do it. Everybody wants to.
Yes.
And there's a couple of blockages to doing it, this way, that cognitive behavioral way, where you defeat the disorder by going toward it. But, and I understand the most common is, well, this is really hard and this is scary. So that for everybody has that block. But then there are some that just feel there's almost a despondence that says, well, this is hard and scary. I would love to do it, but what's the point? I don't have the ability to recover from this.
Yeah.
And I think maybe that undercurrent of inescapability, like nothing, because in that traumatic or abusive event, there's nothing you could do. Nothing you did stopped it from happening. It just kept happening. So,
and physiologically, your body does shut down and your cognitive brain is offline. So it's like you can't start, getting logical when someone's in the middle of the amygdala is going off. You can't start saying, right. So I think it's that expecting that's going to happen. And you know what? It might happen, but when you have more of an understanding, it might happen, but it's going to move through you. Much like the way we talk about thoughts, it's kind of the same thing with your physiology. When you have an understanding that that's what's going on and that, you might feel some stuff, but that's all that's going on. And, it will move through you, and your thinking brain will eventually, come back online,
Right.
and you will be able to manage.
And I think but what's interesting about this is it adds another layer underneath the stuff that I'm continually talking about. So for me, the message is always, yes, you may panic. You may experience extreme panic, but if you just go into it and don't react to it, it will pass, just like you were just talking about.
Mm-hmm.
Now, for somebody who maybe didn't have that traumatic background, like me, the experience ends there. Yes, I had a panic attack,
Yes.
and I was okay, and I'm back online, and I'm living my life, and I just taught myself not to be afraid of the panic.
Right.
But for somebody who comes from maybe the background that many of your clients do,
Mm-hmm.
there's another level of story that has to be told afterwards.
Yes.
The level that says, yep, it was just panic, it was fine, it was just physiology, I was okay, I did it better this time, and I learned not to be afraid. But then those people may have to continue the story and say, see, this wasn't like it was. I did escape it.
Yes.
It's not just I was okay. It was I was able to get out of the situation.
Yes. See, there is also some work that has to be done that I do with my clients, which is really looking at the places in their life, because when you've been through trauma, it's very black and white, and you believe that you are powerless because you were powerless and it's been conditioned. And so you presently, in your present life, I'm powerless, I'm helpless, I can't do anything. But you start to, I help them look at the areas where they do have empowerment, that they are able and capable. And so I work towards helping them see their own empowerment. And that really helps start to demolish some of those early beliefs that went along with the trauma experience. So in other words, when that traumatic experience happened, yes, it was a physiological response of immobility, but then it moved up to our brain and we made a narrative about it, a story. And the story was, I'm capable, I'm incapable, I'm frozen, I can't get out, things will never change. And then that becomes our beliefs. So the two really go together. So that's why I do think it's important to really look at those things too, because then as we start to feel more empowered and see our strengths, we will have more confidence to maybe take the opportunity to drive. Yeah.
Yep. And I think we are in almost 100% agreement on this. You're just deeper, I think. I don't know if that makes any sense. So it does. A huge fan of, when you are not in a panic, for my people, if you will, when you're not in a panic, those tools that you can learn from a cognitive behavioral therapist, for instance, are extremely valuable. Fact checking and thought challenging, much like you're talking about. When you're in a rational state, you can look at, rationally say, hey, wait a minute, I have a job, I have a family, I accomplish things. You can challenge those false beliefs and then use that when you go into that dangerous or what you perceive as a dangerous situation to help you guide yourself through it. So it's very similar. There's just an additional dimension, I think, that comes with somebody who's been conditioned by trauma or abuse to feel incapable. Everybody feels afraid. Everybody knows it's hard to do these things that I talk about. But I guess if you've got that traumatic background, you may feel literally incapable of tackling this process before it even starts. Yeah. So that is an amazing insight that I think would be so helpful for people to hear. So helpful.
Yeah. And why I love it so much is because, I spent decades really, blaming myself, shaming myself. Oh, you can't even drive. What's wrong with you? And, look at other people, how they do it without blinking. Just constantly, and no compassion. And I had already been through a childhood where I was completely abandoned. Now I'm just continuing, the damage by telling myself off and not being kind to myself at all. But that's completely changed, completely.
Huh. I find the definition sometimes of compassion could slide depending on, the context that you're in. And sometimes compassion, I see people sometimes confuse being kind to themselves and compassion can become an avoidance for people who are trying to deal with an anxiety disorder. But I don't think it's that. Compassion is just acknowledging, hey, I had this conditioning. This isn't my fault. It's okay for me to have these thoughts and I can fix them. To me, that's a much more compassionate look at yourself. Compassion and self-care doesn't always mean sitting in an Epsom salt bath with candles and staying. But I think, and I know it sounds a little funny, but I run across many people who will wrap themselves in that cloak. I must be kind to myself, but really it just means I'm afraid, so I'm just going to retreat. Mm-hmm. Whereas I think what you're talking about is more of an acknowledgement of what you went through.
Absolutely. See, that's another huge piece for trauma survivors. Like it's so ginormous. And that is that, we have been through such horrific situations, many of us, our entire childhood, adolescent, and we did not have one compassionate look or one compassionate eye or acknowledgement or validation, not one. And so that left us feeling like there was something very wrong with me, or that I must be garbage, or I must be just horrible, because nobody is acknowledging this horrific thing I've been through. Yeah. And so by being compassionate towards ourselves, it just changes things for us internally. We don't have to then look for other people to approve of us or give us the validation, because we are now seeing ourselves as we really are and giving ourselves what we needed then and now.
Yeah. And I think that ability to kind of learn to trust yourself again is usually a big part of the puzzle when people are going through this anxiety disorder recovery. Yeah. If you're a trauma survivor, an abuse survivor, that must be that much more difficult. Yeah. And so we often see there's two kinds of reassurance seeking that I see. There's the technical reassurance seeking. Are you sure I'm not having a heart attack? Which is normal in the beginning. Mm-hmm. But then there's the recovery reassurance seeking. Did I do that right? Am I doing this right? Mm-hmm. Should I have done this differently? Should I be thinking differently? Should I be acting differently? And it's almost that need, like, please validate that I am doing this correctly now, as opposed to just, I think I do everything wrong because that's what I was taught.
Yes.
So yeah, it helps me understand a little bit more when the reassurance seeking becomes more of, please tell me I'm doing this right, because I don't think I'm capable of doing it right. So you need to tell me. Yeah. So it was so incredibly helpful to see it in a different light sometimes.
And this is where I guess because of my own experience of knowing the complete isolation, I describe it as feeling like you're the only person alive in the world and nobody gives a blank. And it's just and so when I listen to my clients speak, I just want to grab them and hold them and tell them that they are loved and that they matter and that I see them. And because this is what they have never had. They've never had that acknowledgement and attunement. And
well, it must be so tremendously helpful when you do that. We should be doing this together, because it would be like good cop, bad cop. Monique's going to tell you that you're great, then Drew's going to kick your ass out the door and make you go do the exposure. So I like you. My partner here wants to beat the hell out of you. So,
that's
anyway,
funny.
This is such a useful conversation, and I so appreciate you taking the time. I think we're up to about 20 or so minutes, so we don't want to make it too long.
Okay.
And tell everybody where they can find you, and I will, in the description of this podcast, whether you're listening on iTunes or whatever, and on my website, I'll link the specific episode that Monique is talking about that she did in her podcast. But otherwise, where can people reach out to you?
Okay, well, I also have a podcast called Freedom from CPTSD and Anxiety. And I have a Facebook and an Instagram account at CPTSD Coach. And those are the places you can find me.
Cool. Well, I encourage everybody, especially if this stuff resonates, like, go and reach out to Monique and see what she's got to offer, because there's a tremendous amount there. And as always, my friend, it is a pleasure to do this with you.
Oh, you too.
Yes, I cannot wait to do the next one. And I guess you have a great day.
Oh, you too. Thanks. Bye, Drew.
All right. Bye, Monique.
Bye-bye.
Yeah. Push through the pressure like an atom bomb. You keep on dancing like it's your last song. Makes no difference if you're right or wrong. Now you're on your way. It's in the afterglow. It's in the lyrics of the songs we know. It's in these feelings that you never show. Yeah, you're doing fine. It's all around you, you can breathe it in. And this is where your story begins. You got the feeling that you're gonna win. Yeah, you're doing fine.
Hey, what's up, guys? Drew here. In the 5 years that I've done the podcast, I've never had a sponsor. But now it's time for me to put in a little plug for the day job, the business that I own. And that business is managed WordPress hosting. So if you have a website and it runs WordPress, and you'd like WordPress hosting that makes WordPress faster, more secure, and way easier than you ever imagined it would be, then check out Helix. You can find us online at imhelix.com. That's IAMHELIX.com. We took a long time to build Helix. I'm super proud of it. It works spectacularly. We take really good care of our customers, and I promise we would take really good care of you too. So if you're in the market for WordPress hosting that will blow your mind, check out Helix. I would appreciate the consideration. I thank you for coming by and listening, and I'll see you the next time.